going to happen in the future, and what does that mean for us as healthcare professionals? Today we're speaking with Craig Rispin, who is a business futurist and an innovation expert. Craig is going to share with us tips on how we can think like a futurist and how we can predict the future. Today we're speaking to business futurist and innovation expert Craig Rispin. Craig, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
You're welcome.
So Craig, you're a futurist. Can you tell me, what is a futurist?
Well, it's a pretty simple thing to explain. You probably know what a historian is, right?
Yeah, I do.
So we're reverse historians.
Great.
Yeah.
So, are you like fortune tellers? How do you
No.
know what the future is?
No. Well, futurists study the future and historians study the past. And there are systems and techniques that one can use. And it is a real job, being a futurist, actually.
Mm-hmm.
You know, our professional society has 20,000 members worldwide.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, what about for healthcare professionals? So, what do you see as the future for healthcare professionals? How is technology going to change the way we work, do you think?
Well, there's been a big shift within the last 11 years, and specifically with new technology. And new technology is now merged with the medical field. So if you go back and you think about, Google's only 11 and a bit years old.
Wow.
Right, just think about that.
I can't imagine life without it.
I know, a lot of people are saying BG, before Google. And that was a long time ago in a lot of people's minds.
Yeah.
But you think about the tremendous growth that we've had within the technology industry, the IT industry, and the internet industry in those 11 years. And that's all because of something called Moore's Law. Yeah,
Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, Dr. Moore was a co-founder of a small startup in Silicon Valley. You probably heard of them. What's her name again? Oh yeah, Intel. Yeah. Well, he was a futurist. He made a prediction. He said that the price performance of chips would double every 2 years about, and it's been true for 40 years.
And what did people think at that time? Did they think that was going to be true, or was his prediction way out there?
No, there was huge arguments whether that was going to be true. They said it couldn't be sustained, not for a long time, and that engineering couldn't keep up with it. But this became known as Moore's Law. And the entire IT industry, and then related, the internet industries, all been related to this growth curve, which is an exponential growth curve, as you probably know.
Yeah.
Well, now the medical industry is so merged with technology now that it's on exactly the same growth curve.
Wow, so change is getting quicker.
It is. It's exponentially accelerating. It's an incredible thing. And you can see it in all different areas, except client-facing areas, because people still have to deal with patients.
Yeah.
But the technology that they have at hand, it's just incredible.
And do you think people will always need to deal with patients, or are there going to be, another way to deliver our services?
Oh, I think there's a lot of different ways to deliver your services. In fact, I'm thinking of one, I would call him a doctor of the future, and many other magazine articles have called Dr. J. Parkinson, the doctor of the future. But I think he's really using technology of the now, but you can see a glimpse of what the future is going to be like.
And what's he doing?
Well, for instance, he becomes Facebook friends with his patients.
Interesting.
So, instead of just, come in, set an appointment, I'll have a little chat with you, you can just ping him, just do a little update of, you may have seen my blood results came in. He sends back the results on a Facebook update.
Wow.
You can just ping him for a little bit of information. And actually, it's a really interesting model, because what he's done is he's used the modern technology, but he's sort of gone back to the future, because here's a doctor, and he's a general practitioner, but he does house calls.
Wow, interesting.
And I know there are doctors that still do that.
Interesting.
Oh, I know, but what he's found is that the majority of the time in his medical practice was administrative work.
Yeah.
And this administrative work that he was doing in his practice was taking away from his patients. So if he could optimize and innovate in this particular area, that he could have more and more FaceTime with his patients. He said 6 minutes isn't enough.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about social media. Do you think there's a place for that with health professionals, or is it unprofessional?
Well, you think about it. We're trying to have professional relationships, maybe not commercial relationships. You know, it's primary care relationships. But if you were going to go look for somebody that was an expert, many times these days people wouldn't look in the yellow pages,
Google.
or wouldn't phone a friend. They would Google.
Yeah.
And probably the second thing to come up in Google would be their LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
And LinkedIn.com is a fantastic resource, but I don't see many healthcare professionals using it.
No, I don't either, no.
But all of the Fortune 1000 chief executives are, and you think,
Interesting.
at least the CEOs of big medical firms, they're on there. Why wouldn't you want your primary care physician to be on there, for instance?
And what about confidentiality in the internet? Is there things that we need to do to protect ourselves, or things that we need to know about?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And in fact, a futurist back in the 1960s said there'll be a new class of company that will emerge in the future, and I don't think we have it yet.
Yeah.
And this type of company was called a safe harbor company.
A safe harbor?
Yeah, safe harbor. So where are we going to take our very private information? Who are we going to trust it to? Are we going to entrust it to banks?
Yeah.
Probably not. Microsoft? I'm not so sure. Google? I don't know about that. The church?
They'll probably come up with technology first, though.
Well, you know, both Google and Microsoft now have these electronic portfolios, health portfolios, and they're trying to make big inroads because they think this is a huge opportunity for them. But this is really a concern, especially in America, where there's intense legislation that if you leak one patient record, you can be upwards of fines of $200,000 for each record.
And you can get cut off. You can get deregistered easily.
You can. So it's incredibly important to look at these things. And I could talk a little bit about security and give some advice in this area. If you'd like, we could talk a little bit about that.
Just a couple of things about security. I think it's important for us to know, because I think that's one of the big things that we're scared about before going into the area.
Yes.
So we see people doing it and we think that's great, but it's a bit scary with this security. So just a little bit about that would be fantastic.
Sure. So the future of security is not what most people are using today. So the future of security are systems that are maintained not by one company, but by groups of volunteers.
Okay.
And so, for instance, I work with IBM, and IBM has moved all of their banks and all of their insurers all over to the Linux operating system.
Yeah.
They don't use Windows anymore.
Wow.
And do you know why?
No.
Because that's where all the shooting's happening. It's sort of like Baghdad. If you live there, you'd probably want to move out. And Windows, the Windows world, there have been more viruses released in 2009 than ever in history.
Yeah.
And so this is a big issue, but it's pretty much the standard in the healthcare area.
Yeah.
And it's a big, big risk.
And what about Apple? They say you don't get viruses on that.
Well, we haven't had any yet.
Okay. But there's always potential.
There's always potential, but they're not so much a target, even though they're getting more and more market share.
Yeah.
They don't seem to be so much a target for security. Now, a lot of people say I'm anti-Microsoft, but I'm not really. I work with some of the biggest security firms in the world. You may know Symantec is one of my clients, and they're the ones.
As if.
And they put out reports that, in a single month, 100,000 malware viruses released.
Wow, some people just have, why would you do that?
Yeah, and the Washington Post, their security analyst in the IT area, said that he wouldn't allow any members of his family or any business professionals that he speaks to use Windows to access bank accounts. This is confidential information. He said it's getting hacked. So in the future, I think you'll see there'll be proprietary operating systems like Windows, and there'll be open source operating systems. And I think in the medical area, there'll be a big shift towards open source.
And so open source means giving, it's free to use.
Yes, it's free software, yes.
So can you tell me a little bit about your opinion about that? So some people would say, we should be giving out a lot of our information for free and things like that, but then why would they pay us to come and see us?
Well, that's interesting, isn't it?
Can you tell me what your opinion is about that?
Well, I think what used to be private and confidential, or hard to get to now, has all been released on the internet, hasn't it? And so people are overwhelmed with information, and what they really want are people that can steer them through the overwhelming amount of information and give them advice.
And give them credible advice too, because if we're not doing it, someone else is obviously giving them dodgy advice.
That's right. And I think more and more patients are turning up as they think as informed patients. They've done a lot of research. They've spoken to other patients. They turn up and they say, these are the things I should be discussing with
this
your
is
doctor.
what I have.
Yes.
And this is what you need to give me.
Yes. Now, if you don't want that sort of patient, then the future's probably not for you. But if that's the kind of patient you want, which is informed, educated, willing to have a discussion, willing to pay for professional advice, then this is the future, really, of professional advice in every area, not only the medical area. You know, just yesterday in the news, financial planners aren't going to be able to make commissions anymore.
Yeah, wow.
This is going to change their business model forever.
That's right.
And everybody's going to be moving to being paid for their expertise.
So Craig, just finally, you've written a book, How to Think Like a Futurist. If we want to increase our future thinking, what are just 3 tips that we can use to try and do that?
Sure. There are 3 techniques that I recommend in my book that are easy to do and now cost nothing, actually. One technique is called environmental scanning. So that's looking out at what's going on around the world, see if there's some things happening other places that maybe not have hit here locally.
And maybe other industries too?
That's right, yes. And there are people that collate information in various different industries. And in your industry, probably the best resource is Health Futures Digest.
Okay,
Health
great.
Futures Digest, and they're talking about all different aspects, personalized medicine and the future of a medical practice. And you can set up Google alerts, because Google has alerts now that you can put in whatever your field of study is, and they will keep you updated automatically.
Brilliant.
And that's called environmental scanning.
Yeah.
A couple other techniques are called scenario planning. You probably heard about that. Looking at different influencing factors and what are the multiple possible outcomes in the future. And I've done this with big medical firms like Johnson & Johnson, who use this technique for doing their long-term planning. And probably the third and most enjoyable are barbecues. Yeah. So futures get together and we have barbecues and a bit of wine.
That would be interesting.
And we have chats about what the future could be. And it's all about talking about what the optimum, what the ideal future could be, not just what's going to happen.
I've got this picture of Futurama in my head. We have a barbecue with the futurists.
Yeah, but it's a great way to have, a little bit of wine, some good food, have a conversation. And these are sometimes referred to as future journeys, or we use the technique many times, a facilitation technique called open space. It allows all sorts of ideas to flow. And then we talk about, how can we create this ideal future that we hope to see.
Craig, thank you so much for speaking with us today. That you've given us some great insights, and I'm looking forward to the future.
Well, thanks very much.
We've just heard some great insights about how the future could be, what that means to health professionals, and how we can think like a futurist. Craig Rispin, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
You're welcome.